So a quick example of another grump. If I hadn't searched through all the counters to find the correct one here, this is just the 36th Infantry Division. It's got some kind of different background from all the rest of the British infantry. I don't know if that's a typo, by the way. It could just be. But it's different from everything else, therefore it couldn't be replenished with them. But it just shows up as though that's all it is. It's just yet another regular British infantry division according to this. Now, this is the case in some cases. Mountain units are the exception, but some other types of units where they're a different nationality or whatever, it's not necessarily clear that they are. And this one, by the rules, should be treated so that it can't be replenished, actually. I don't know what it's supposed to represent. There's no indication anywhere in the game. There are no other units of that coloration. There are no replacements of that coloration. So maybe it's supposed to just be a British unit that's colored differently for some different reason. It's a colored British unit. I have no idea. All I know is that if it is to represent something special, I have no clue. So if I'm not going by the individual designations, which I'm not anymore, I would just pull out an Honorable 7-4 and not worry about this. Anyway, no idea what I'm supposed to do about it. I'll just continue on. Like I said, on the end of the last video, it doesn't matter too much as long as you don't care. Well, things got real ugly real fast for the Germans. Remember how I say I'm always sloppy and everything? Well, I got too sloppy here where the trench line had already been broken and only had 10 strength points. The French did a mobile attack on that, drove it back here. They didn't have enough strength because there were 3 units in adjacency, so this trench wasn't reduced. This is very, very powerful right here. I don't know what it is, but close to 30 strength points. So they attacked again with the same stack across this minor river. And there were only 3 strength points left. They destroyed a headquarters. They've broken through. Now, I don't know if the French can hold this. I don't know what can happen. The Germans may have to pull back. I have to decide here. But this is a major, major breakthrough. Of course, it could end up meaning that the French get pocketed or something. It could end up creating a very, very wild situation. But what the French are trying to do is break this trench line. Right now, they've got it sealed off where they can attack it without the trench advantage. We'll see how long that holds. The Germans definitely need to mobilize a lot to get in there, which might mean room for an attack somewhere else, say from the Brits or something. So far, that doesn't look like it went well for the French. The Germans managed to surround the breakthrough and crack this. Now they've got some isolated units. Who knows, though? They had to strip stuff off the corners, off the edges of this front. And there may be enough force with the surrounding. See, the German trenches, wherever they are still in place, though. And the French don't have a lot of power against this with only 1 stack. And there's quite a big force of Germans there. So I think this is French stack's going to surrender. Of course, there's weaknesses over here, which won't let the French out. But they may end up causing breakthroughs where there wouldn't have been before. I've got to look and try to calculate out my supplies carefully for this, though, because things got really disrupted for both sides, really. The Germans used up pretty much all their supplies in this salient because some of them got captured. They don't go to the other player, they're just destroyed. So they had to move headquarters. They were able to ship 10 extra supplies in here, but now they're down to very little in this whole front. And the French, well, they spent a lot on their attack and may not be able, you know, they did 2 attacks essentially. They may not be able to afford enough to even manage that massive attack on this hex. And this hex is pretty well defended. It's got woods in place as well as a trench under there, which adds up to a -4 +2. +2 when the defender rolls their counterattack. That's not pleasant. Well, at this point, I'm not sure who did the better. The Germans certainly got the better out of the loss demoralization points factor, which is probably the important thing. The French attack here, they tried to break through to get to their defeated units. Those all surrendered. They didn't get the breakthrough. But they did get a breakthrough over here, and who knows how that's going to develop. The German army is just sort of this mess with places in the line that aren't terribly well defended at this point. Yeah, like here. They're going to have to do something to try to build some kind of line. And this is all crappy terrain to defend in. They had been up against a line that was actually pretty good, with some terrain advantages perhaps. Well, not so much here. But they've kind of gotten broken through everywhere. And then a heavy attack here didn't go well for the French at all. That was probably a mistaken attack. But the French have used a tremendous amount of supplies on these attacks. So I don't know if they can carry out a continued attack. On the other hand, the Germans also used quite a bit. Theirs are down, but they're in the probably 40s. The French look like they're at maybe around 30. We could see an attempt to grind this out and see where it falls out. I think that's likely. Just because, well, the French kind of feel like they lost a couple of corps up here for no good reason, permanently. They're never going to be able to rebuild them, which is kind of a problem, because I think in the long run they get more replacement points than the Germans do. They get more of a built-up army that they can keep building. That's the only reason I can justify the huge stock of replacement points they have, is they must be getting them at some good rate. I'm not sure that's true, though, because when I look at their replacement schedule, it's not too good. It looks like it drops down to 1 per turn, and then every other turn, and then once per month. So, I don't know. Maybe that's just meant to build up. I don't really know, but they've lost a big potent force. Like 4 of their regular infantry disappeared there. So, that's got to hurt somehow. The Germans, on the other hand, took some definite losses as well. Let's see how it shakes out. And now this episode in which the French gained very little but this 1 hex, they've been driven back out of that as well, with a big stack of German units there. Now, the German line is still weak in a lot of places. I don't know if it's weak enough to cross, though. When you're involving cutting across a river, you're talking about some painful risks in terms of the damage chart, if it's even possible. It actually looks pretty solid in terms of, I'm not sure the French want to keep going. The weakest point may be right here, and we may keep hitting that, swinging that territory back and forth if we can do so. We'll see if we can get the points. And the Allies come back with 2 big unsuccessful assaults, 1 here and 1 up here. Neither terrible, but in terms of supply, it's looking really ugly from the Allied point of view. The French have, you know, under 20 they are sitting there. The English, they also spent a good deal, but they still have a big quantity. No, that's Belgians. So yeah, they're not doing too well either. Of course, they're also draining the Germans. They're not sure how badly it is, but the Germans are not in great shape either up here. They've got one with a 10 in it and another with a 9, so they're actually doing better supply-wise than the Allies are. The Allies really have to call this thing off. They're not gaining ground. They're not really doing damage proportionate to what they're taking. The French, for example, have now broken their 1,000 mark. The Germans are at over 1,100 at this point, so they're not in... They have more room. Oh, is the problem. The German army looks stretched. That's the thing. It feels like, if I just had a little more, I could just do it. But that's kind of illusionary. As you can see, you know, even when you do punch through and find a place, there's enough Germans to push you back and to cause the problem. And then very, very World War I feeling here. All right. Onward. We're almost halfway through October. The Germans now turn things around, and I'm kind of iffy about this because I don't know if they had enough supply that they should be doing this. I can always feel like it's hard to hide that information from myself, but I saw an opportunity here and they broke through into this hex, leaving a couple more devastation markers. There's just a couple of only 5 strength points holding the hex. So they were able to push into there, and they caused, what, 4 points of damage to 2, along with the retreat. And now that's kind of, you know, creating opportunities for maybe an attack up here better, although that's still across the river line, or up in here, and just trying to see if they can, you know, force the French into an uglier position. This also, though, does serve one really valuable purpose. It should pull some French strength off. I think the French assault is done. The Germans kind of thought so too, and thought maybe they're out of supplies or close to out of supplies, and we're still have some. So let's make this attack. If they're not out of supplies, if they were shifting to try to continue an assault in more depth somewhere else, well, we'll force them back to defend against us. And if not, yeah, at least we're gaining some damage on them. If they're already out of supply, we're not really throwing anything away. So the only real question is if the French had tons and tons of supply compared to us, and they stopped their assault, and now we opened up a new front that they could fight in. That's the risk. We'll see. We also don't know if the British are going to stop at this point. I sent additional troops into this hex, but it's not a lot, and maybe the British will keep going because it doesn't look as potent as I had thought it would be. And I think the offensives are mainly over. The distraction definitely pulled French off here, but on the other hand, the English spent all their supply, but the Germans don't know this, attacking this hex. They mainly a diversion to try to wear the Germans out, and they mostly did that. Right now, everybody's kind of at the bare bones of supplies. The French have 4. The Germans have, well, still a reasonable amount over here, but 8, 13, 19. Conceivably, they could wreck someone. The British have 0, but nobody knows these things. All they know is the lines look fairly solid again, and nobody's blinked. Yes, the French have stopped attacking, but when they were attacked, they showed they had supply points. They had enough to cover the entire attack. So it's kind of a... And the British actually had just enough to completely cover their attack. It would have been a sign if they had shown that they didn't have enough. Of course, they have a lot of strength on their segment of the line. That's very, very powerful, and I don't know if the Germans would want to go up against that even if it was unsupplied. Alright, well, we move into the 5th turn of October, and we'll see if the Allies can, well, if everybody can kind of rebuild. With nobody having a lot of supply, there's not this big imperative to attack. The English kind of had one as well, because they have these damn Canadian units that they have to cycle into battle. If they don't get them into battle, they're throwing troops away. They don't have that, you know, as big a deal with the British. First of all, because they've got British losses that they haven't even recovered yet, because the Brits are going to take the majority of the losses, but also they have a lot of British replacement counters, not like the French have. The amount the French have seems just mind-boggling. I don't know what it's meant to represent at all. Anyway, onward. And with the offensives done, we roll into November. Nothing really changing. The board retaining its same shape that it's had since the Schlieffen Plan. Question, of course, remains, do the Germans want to build that Hindenburg line? They do, but, you know, as a fallback at the very least. They don't have to actually fall back to it because those entrenchments remain permanently. So you could see a German line forming back here very easily as being a valuable fallback position if they start having to withdraw too many troops. You don't want this to be a rout. You want them to have a place to go back to. It's an option that's not available for the Allies, and I find that kind of disturbing in a sense. You might say, well, the French would fall in this case if they didn't build it, because they historically didn't build it or whatever. They weren't pressed that hard afterwards. But I'm not sure. You know, it seems to me that if France could survive the initial Schlieffen Plan, let's say Paris fell, which they can in the game, why would they not? And if they can survive the game without surrendering, because there is no auto fall there, Why wouldn't they create fallback lines? Why would they be excluded from this possibility if they were in the position where it looked like they were, likely to collapse on the Western Front? I don't know the answer to that. Again, the game tries to simulate exactly what happened, and there's not a lot of room for anything beyond that. The situation on the front can be different, but it doesn't handle the big political questions. Maybe the strategic game will, I don't know. Anyway, up it goes.